Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we are definitely not looking at a cheerful, uplifting history. Actually, we're stepping right into a grim, gothic fable. It's a complete descent. We're going to trace exactly how the archetype of the storyteller devolves, going from a guardian of truth down to a scavenger of death and ultimately into this terrifying architect of lies. It's really a theatrical journey into a world of perpetual twilight. Let's dive right in.
Now, the entire core of this descent rests on a single, really haunting realization. I am the ghost of the story I tell. Think about a traditional heroic arc, right? The hero usually achieves some sort of atonement and brings life back to their people. But here, no way. The ultimate atonement is completely inverted. The bard realizes they're really just a vessel. They survive the falling ash in these crumbling empires for one reason only, to ensure that while the world might literally burn to ash, the echo of its agony will never, ever falls silent.
So what we're essentially looking at here is an inverted hero's journey. The storyteller isn't crossing the threshold to save the light, or return with a boon of life for their village. They're stepping into the dark specifically to witness it. And when they cross back over, they don't deliver salvation, they deliver a masterpiece of grief. It's a song so heavy with the sheer truth of human cruelty that it grants the survivors the absolute only mercy left, the bleak strength to endure the unendurable.
So how does the devolution like that actually happen? Well, it takes place along what's called the liminal path, which is mapped out across 4 distinct environments. We start at the dawn of decline in a cooling village, then move down into the borderlands, specifically the blood-soaked trenches. From there, we cross the threshold of the gray mists, and finally we arrive at absolute silence in the uncanny forest. Let's break down this tragedy, starting right at the beginning.
Act 1. The Fading Candle. Okay, so in the dawn of the world's decline, we find the traditional bard. He's walking among the living as the keeper of lore and the mediator of reality. Now, his source of creative power, it's fueled purely by curiosity and empathy. He enters a village where the hearths are literally cooling down, and he acts as this compassionate witness to their final acts of kindness. And his ultimate impact on his listeners is beautiful. He transforms their humble history into myth, so their lessons are never forgotten. But as the ash begins to fall, he realizes something terrifying. A hero's victory is completely silent if there's no one left around to hear the song right. So, hoping to find a new audience before his candle of truth flickers out completely, he steps onto that thin, gray, liminal path.
Act 2. The Scavenger's Harvest.
As we move further down that path and deeper into the dark, the air grows thick with the scent of decay, and the archetype takes a dark shift. We meet the grim, dark bard. But he isn't preserving history, he's acting as a scavenger of misery. To really understand him, we have to understand his environment, the whale's belly. This is a literal graveyard of empires. The hero's path here isn't paved with gold. No, it's paved with the shattered teeth of martyrs. The bard wanders these blood-soaked trenches specifically to find the melody hidden in a soldier's final rattle. He doesn't care at all about the history of the villagers anymore. He just wants to harvest the raw emotion of the damned.
And get this. This scavenger operates with visceral, almost unthinkable cruelty. His instrument is a violi, literally strung with the gut of traitors, and his melodies are woven entirely from the dying breaths of forgotten kings. He's out there, harvesting raw tales of agony. When desperate survivors of this ash-choked world crawl past him, he flashes them a charming smile and sells them hope. But here's the thing. He knows hope is the absolute most useless commodity in a broken world. His haunting sonata doesn't save their lives. It just prepares their souls for the void, marching them right up to the edge of our next environment.
Act 3. Weaver of Paranoia. Right on the threshold of the uncanny forest, in the gray mists, this new, terrifying figure emerges, the Shadow Bard, or the Architect of Lies. Now he watches the first 2 bards and realizes something sinister. Stories aren't just art, and they aren't even really truth. They are tools for total dominance. Driven completely by narcissism, he uses a terrifying mechanic called the twisted word. First, he just leans in and whispers poison into the ears of the remaining travelers. Second, he practices ruthless character assassination against the original lorekeeper. Third, he uses gaslighting and rumor-mongering to breed such intense paranoia that people actually believe the ash is a blessing and their own leaders are the enemy. And finally, he completely rewrites the history of the world to justify the encroaching darkness.
Which brings us to this absolutely devastating realization.
A fabricated story is a more terrifying weapon than any sword. The architect's manipulation is so lethal that his twisted narrative breeds intense jealousy and paranoia. The villagers, totally broken by his dark lullabies, actually erupt into frantic, doomed charges against imagined enemies. It's tragic. The truth literally dies in the screaming wind.
Act 4. The Architect's Legacy. The fire is officially out. The travelers have finally crossed the threshold into the uncanny forest. This is a completely destroyed environment where the decline is absolute and absolutely nothing can be taken at face value. The original Lorekeeper's records? Burned and entirely replaced by the architect's propaganda. Even the grimdark bard's melodies are now only used to bolster doomed charges for the architect's own glory. The architect stands totally alone, the loudest and actually the only voice left, telling a story of a world that never truly existed. He proves that in the ashes, the loudest voice defines the only truth that remains.
To bring this all together, just think about the chilling evolution we've just walked through. It is a complete transformation from an empathetic witness to a weaponized storyteller. You've got the traditional lorekeeper who draws his creative power from empathy and curiosity, impacting his listeners by preserving their history into myth. Then you descend to the grim-dark scavenger, who harvests agony and dying breaths just to sell useless hope and prepare souls for the void. And finally, you hit rock bottom with the Shadow Architect. He draws his power from pure narcissism and uses the twisted word to achieve total, absolute control through rewritten history.
So as the Shadow Bard packs up his vial heavy with fresh tales of misery, he leaves behind a world where the actual truth is buried beneath his own fabricated narrative. And it leaves us with a really lingering, provocative thought. Is the history you believe the actual truth? Or is it simply the song of the loudest voice in the ashes? Keep that in mind the next time you hear a story told. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious and always, always question the song you're being sold.